BRN, where educators share what works.
We can sit and we can grade work and we can put our comments and give it back to the students. But if they're actually creating the rubric and then changing the rubric, they were starting to think about what they were looking for themselves and how they could improve on their project. So, yeah, I think rubrics is a great way for giving feedback, but I think that students creating them themselves is a really good way of doing it.
Well, hello everybody. So nice to see you all here. Actually, I'm glad that we were all able to make it because I have an urgent need from the group. My semester is 2 weeks in now, and I am absolutely drowning in grading in a way that I didn't even foresee. With active learning and other kind of touch points with my students, I'm getting a lot of information coming from students weekly, and it just feels overwhelming. And I had the idea, is there any way that AI could be leveraged to help us out? We've been talking a lot about using it for student learning, but is there any way to have AI help us out with grading? There's a lot to that, and there's some ethical considerations as well as practical considerations, but I'm throwing it out to all of you. Like, what do you think? What do you think about using AI for grading?
When you say grade, are you really talking about assessing? And most importantly, how are you going to use the data? But there are tools out there that can help you as long as you're not just relying on the tool, but you're also reviewing the information that you receive.
It's a great question. So I'll give you the context and what I'm really drowning in, and give you a little bit more meat to the bones there. So I have co-opted the assignment called a WISC. I wish I could have looked up who I stole that from, because it's certainly not my idea. But WISC is an acronym for Watch, Summarize, Question, and it's used frequently in flipped learning. Students watch a video before class, they summarize that video in their own words, and then they ask one or more questions, and that's the formative assessment piece that lets you know that what the class is struggling with and what you can review and focus on in the classroom. I have my students do readings instead of videos for the way that I kind of pseudo or quasi-flip my courses, and I've co-opted the idea of a WISC into a RISC. Read, summarize, questions. So students read a chapter from the textbook, summarize it in their own words, and answer questions. And I'm getting about 100 of these chapter summaries every Sunday night.
Love it.
And I review them for content. I skim them. I review them for content, but also for accuracy and clarity, for being comprehensive. But it's those questions at the end that really kill me. I can skim them and get a good sense if the students did a high effort job on the summary. But depending on the depth and number of the questions at the end, it becomes 10 minutes an assignment. I don't have to do the math for you. 10 times 100 winds up to be a lot of hours on a Sunday night. So I was wondering if I could, and again, ethically should, be feeding those student questions into ChatGPT and letting ChatGPT clarify the student misconception.
So if I can, I'm going to say yes and no. Because
Thanks, Dan.
really awesome. And the reason I say that is, yes, you can feed them into ChatGPT. I think, though, one of the big lines that we have to draw is whether or not we're using AI to assess or we're using AI to grade. To me, assessing is definitely rooted in feedback, and grading is more of a finalized, have we covered the content well enough, long enough that a student could master it? Or do I need to just provide them feedback on their ongoing learning to get them to the next step? And ChatGPT can definitely do that. I mean, there's a lot of tools out there that can even build rubrics for you. Mm-hmm. The feedback that you want to give to your students, I think you can use AI, but I do think that it still needs to be you to determine what that grade should be.
Yes.
Because you're still the professional and you still need to evaluate what the AI is outputting.
Mm-hmm.
Dan, I think that's a really important point you're saying there about that distinction between assessing and grading. And how assessing really is about this, the formative. It's the process, not the product, and it's about giving feedback. Now, one thing I did with my students in a project last semester is they were creating projects based on ChatGPT, and I actually got them to create their own rubrics themselves as part of this process. So the students created their own rubrics for how they wanted their assignments to be assessed by me. But then this became part of the project itself. So we looked at those rubrics, we started adapting those rubrics throughout the semester until the students really felt that they had something that was really going to evaluate them well on their project. And what we found was that they were learning from this process as well. By them creating the rubric and then changing the rubric, they were starting to think about what they were looking for themselves and how they could improve on their projects. So yeah, I think rubrics is a great way for giving feedback, but I think that students creating them themselves is a really good way of doing it.
So I like the sound of this, guys, and I'll tell you why. Because this assignment is an effort-based assignment. Like, you basically get half credit if the entire chapter isn't summarized and full credit if it is. I'm not docking points and half points for minor mistakes. It's really an effort-based assignment. So if I'm hearing you both right, I should be delivering the points, but could be using AI to help me give the feedback.
Yes.
And the reason why I like that is because, and I don't want to come across as arrogant here or a braggart, but I am a mighty fast two-finger typer. But all the same, I'm a two-finger typer. So part of what slows me down is just getting the words out onto the keyboard, and having ChatGPT generate that has been a big help. I've done this for one assignment. A student gave a list of questions, and I saw it and I said, oh man, I'm going to be here for 20 minutes on this one assignment. And I got the idea to copy and paste those into ChatGPT. ChatGPT spit out really, really good feedback, good answers to the questions. To both of your point, I went through that entire response and edited it, and massaged it, and cleaned it up a little bit, but it saved me a lot of time. And then I felt really bad and really guilty, and I didn't do it again.
That's because you've been programmed to feel bad.
Because I'm a teacher.
Because, like, as a teacher, if we find anything that helps us do our job better or easier, it's like we've been programmed to feel bad about it.
Yes.
And that's terrible.
That is true.
I know Turnitin also provides feedback sets, predetermined criteria. So I know some teachers are familiar with that. They also have that AI feature as well.
But Julie, just to throw this out there, I just read this week, there are universities that are dumping Turnitin. Like, people are just getting as far away from it as possible. And I didn't dive into the article enough, but I saw it this week, and I remember using it when I was in college. And I don't know if it's not accurate enough to pick up AI written content or what the issue is, but the people are fleeing from Turnitin.
I'm fleeing from it. I totally agree with why people are fleeing from it. A big difference between the original Turnitin, with students using that or instructors using that to look at students' work, it could pinpoint, it could take you to links on the internet and show you where that information may have come from. So it was a really useful tool for students to see if they'd missed any referencing and to help them understand about plagiarism. And it was a useful tool for instructors as well to see if it was original work or not. But we invited Turnitin to give a presentation at our university, and we were very interested in how it works now with AI. And what it seems to do is that it just gives a percentage. It says it's like 98% this is AI generated, or 16% it's AI generated. But because it's a black box, it's proprietary information, we have no evidence of how it is making that decision. And in some universities, this has led to big problems where there have been lawsuits, there have been students who've been accused of plagiarism. They've managed, through going backwards through Google Docs and various forms, to show that they hadn't plagiarized. So I would say don't touch them.
But Julie raises a good point. I've used Turnitin as an instructor quite a bit, and not for the plagiarism detection. It is a very good grading platform. You know, it's, I think, Julie, what you're referring to, it kind of has like awkward passage and needs new paragraph, and you could just drag and drop these comments right onto the student's work. And that too was a time saver. So it's a shame to hear that, Dan, because above and beyond the plagiarism detection, Turnitin has a lot of really good, efficient options just for grading written work.
The other thing, Tom, I would say is I've reduced what it is I'm actually grading. And that one has allowed me to, I guess, feel like I'm not behind, because I do more micro conversations with kids in class, giving them that direct feedback. But if kids can use something like ChatGPT or Bard or Claude or whatever, they're able to get that feedback themselves instantly,
right,
without having to go through you to do it. It reduces your workload drastically.
I love that you're saying that, because I know you're middle school and I'm elementary, and I've taught in higher ed as well. Finding time to actually sit down and have those conversations, those conferences in person during class, Dan, love it. So that's one way, and it does limit a lot of that, oh my gosh, why are we taking all this stuff home and grading it on a Sunday? And turning that ownership over to the student, especially in higher ed. That's, I think that's fantastic.
So Julie, you said it's about turning the ownership over to the student. And I certainly agree with this. I think it's more useful for the students. We can sit and we can grade work and we can put our comments and give it back to the students. But if they're actually working on it themselves, adapting the feedback themselves, looking at it themselves, I think it becomes part of the learning process, which is a lot more useful.
Yeah, I have found that ChatGPT and AI platforms in general really shine in any kind of think, pair, share setting. Because in those think, pair, share student collaboration settings, there is no expectation from the instructor that the students have high accuracy, right? We never guaranteeing and banking the effectiveness on the activity that one or both of the students is right all the time. In fact, the value comes from the fact that they do have misconceptions and there are errors and they work those out collaboratively. So, a lot of people will ding AI because sometimes it spits out incorrect information, and that's very true. But if you're using the AI in a think, pair, share context, that's okay, because that's what that always was between two students.
Well, and Tom, I love that you brought up the fact that it can be biased, it can spit out inaccurate information, but when we sit down to grade, you're grading differently on essay 15 than you are on essay 3. And you're grading really differently on essay 55. And we grade differently even based on the name of the paper on the paper. If that kid has a great relationship with you, you may grade a little differently and give a little bit more leniency. You might be a little lighter in your feedback compared to the kid that rubs you wrong every single day and is just a burr under your saddle.
Dan, are you saying that we as humans could be biased just like the eye?
Sometimes even more so.
Oh, well, there we go about using AI.
Well, and that's just it. When we plug something into AI, AI doesn't care who the kid is. We can actually go into a program like Magic School AI, and you can plug in how severe you want the feedback to be on an assignment, how gentle you want it to be. And so it grades or assesses whatever, however you want to set it up.
What was the name of that tool?
magicschool.ai.
So I was recently having the same exact conversation with some colleagues at my institution, and we were all saying the same thing. And what emerged from that conversation was where the disruptions to the consistency of our grading fall. Right? Some of us talked about getting tired, as Dan said, if you've graded a bunch of these in a row. Some of us talked about, well, we chunk it so we don't get tired and we don't kind of lose our focus, but then we lose a little bit of the, like, how many points did I take off for that on this other paper? We lose the consistency. Some of us talked about getting frustrated with the same mistakes. Some of us talked about, actually it gets a lot better by the time I'm on my second glass of wine. When you're losing and the AI never has any of that. With all of the societal biases that it may have on current events and controversial issues, it doesn't get tired, it doesn't get cranky, and it's certainly not drinking wine. So Dan, I think there's a lot of merit to what you're saying there, promoting the ethical use of AI for some assessment because of those factors.
Yeah, interesting.
So what both of you are saying reminds me of this little side experiment that I did, but I just have to pass along. And then we'll have to, I'm sure, scoot and get to our classes. But I was curious about this kind of grading with AI thing. So I basically did what Dan said he heard about. I fed my rubric into ChatGPT, and then I loaded into it a student paper. And I asked ChatGPT to grade the paper using the rubric. And the grade that came back was way, way off from what I gave the student. And I dug into ChatGPT's feedback to try to see why. And I realized that ChatGPT didn't deduct some points that were important to deduct because they weren't in the rubric. So long story short, going through this process iteratively, I finally got good match between my grading and the AI. But the rubric that I wound up generating from that process was so far superior from the rubric that I'd been providing to the students before. It was like night and day. And so now I've got this wonderful reflective rubric that truly captures what I'm looking for in the paper that I can share with students from now on.
So what I really heard from you before we share some tools is being iterative. Mm-hmm. Whatever the tool is, whatever the skill is, you have to practice. You have to review before you can move that forward.
I think you're right. And having the patience to work with the AI to get to the end. Yep.
Yes. I'm just thinking, we've been using, I know you're talking about Flip, but I know we've been using adaptive assessments that include AI for years. NWEA, Terranova testing, people who have used DreamBox for math and reading. Edmentum has programs as well. Then I think of me as a presenter and using something called ClassPoint for PowerPoint. It allows you to do some pre-assessing with your students. Here's my slideshow and here's my content, and it's going to help me automatically make some questions, and then that is something that we can share with students to prepare them for what it is that we want them to learn.
That is awesome. I've got one tool to share, but it's a gold mine. I don't even know how to pronounce it. It's either Float IT or Flot IT. It's FLOT.IT. I don't even know how to describe this. This is like, it's a computer plugin, I guess, and it does two things. If you hit Control-J, it brings up the ChatGPT dialog window over anything you're working on your desktop. So you don't have to navigate to it through a browser anymore. But more importantly, if you highlight text anywhere in a word processing program, on a website, if you highlight any text, it brings up the same ChatGPT prompt, but now that text is automatically going to be loaded into ChatGPT. So you can ask ChatGPT to summarize what you've highlighted, or rewrite what you've highlighted, or change the tone. So it's and the feature's called Copilot, and that's really what it feels like. It feels like you've got another intelligent entity with you as you go through your daily work on a computer. It's amazing.
Yes, I've heard of Copilot before. I've not used it, but yes, I've heard of that.
It's really powerful.
All right, Tom, I'm going to give you 5 different tools. Okay.
Okay, hold on. Let me get this napkin and pen.
Everybody get your pencils out. Get something.
Okay.
All right. So there's Twee, TWEE, and you can use it to, I mean, especially if you're looking to like create assessments, It works great for YouTube videos. I mean, it can summarize a video. It can give you like quiz questions to go along with a video. And all you have to do is drop in the video link. So it's a fantastic tool. There's a lot of other things that it can do, but specifically that. Then there's Curipod. Curipod can also generate assessments for you. There's Conker, and that's Conker .ai. Again, it can do like true and false, fill in the blanks. It can make all of your assessments for you. Again, in turn, it just makes the grading that much easier. MagicSchool.ai. I can't say enough about Magic School just because it has like 95 different applications in the education world. And it's everything from generating your newsletters to providing feedback on assignments. And like I mentioned before, you can level that feedback. How severe do you want it to be, or how gentle do you want it to be? And then there's Eduaide that can do very similar activities for creating the assessments as well as providing some of the feedback.
It just strikes me how much the landscape of education is changing right under our feet.
It is a shift, but for a lot of us, it's a shift that we needed because we were drowning in the work that we had to do. If we can outsource the work, but not outsource the knowing, that's a win.
So well said. Well, I don't know if this is a coffee meetup, a discussion on AI, or group therapy, but I can't tell you how much I appreciate you guys and having this soundboard. Have a great week, everybody. I'll see you here soon.
See you. Bye, everyone.
You can see links to all the tools mentioned in this episode in the show notes. Thanks for listening.